In a galaxy far from Earth where stars burned cold and silence ruled the void, there was a planet called Velmora that shimmered like a jewel in the black sea of space. Velmora was not known for peace or beauty, but for its grand market where beings from across the galaxy gathered to trade rare creatures, forbidden technology, and sometimes living souls. It was here that Liam stood, chained and bruised, among a dozen other humans who had been taken from Earth after the war. His eyes held fire, even if his body showed defeat. He was not the tallest or strongest among the slaves, but something about him was different. He did not bow. He did not beg. He watched everything like a man who still remembered freedom. The auction square was filled with noise, not of humankind, but alien voices sharp and deep that echoed off the walls of the metallic court. Creatures with shining skin, horns, wings, and scales sat in golden seats, watching the humans as if they were pets or toys. The announcer, a tall figure with 4 arms and a silver mask, stepped forward and raised his voice. He praised the health of the humans. He told of their strength. He described their uses. Some would be good for labor, others for pleasure, and a few for science. Then he pointed at Liam and said, "This one is wild and unbroken, a risk but full of fire." The bidding began. Numbers were shouted in strange tongues, lights blinked, hands were raised. Liam did not flinch. He stared straight ahead. One by one, the humans were sold, their faces lost in fear as they were led away. Then came Liam's turn. The announcer called for the start of his bidding, and for a moment there was silence. Some hesitated. Others watched closely. Then a tall figure stepped forward from the shadows at the edge of the square. Her skin was deep blue like the night sky. Her eyes glowed faint gold. She wore no crown, but everyone knew her. She was Queen Alira of the Threx Dominion, a name spoken with fear and power. She said one word. Her bid was final and far higher than the rest. No one dared to challenge her. The announcer bowed low. Liam was unchained and led to her side. He looked at her with defiance, but she only stared back with unreadable calm. Without a word she turned and walked away. Liam followed, his hands still bound but his mind spinning with questions. Why would a queen buy a human like him, and what did she want? They entered her ship, sleek and silent like a blade of light. Inside, the walls were soft and warm, filled with strange music and scents. Liam was shown to a room that looked nothing like a cell. It had a bed, food, light, and even books, though written in alien language. The guards did not speak. The queen did not return. For 2 days he waited. On the 3rd day she arrived. She entered the room without noise and stood near the wall. Her voice was soft but strong as she asked him his name. He answered. She asked where he was from. He told her Earth. She nodded as if she already knew. Then she said something that made Liam freeze. She said, "You are not here as a slave. I bought you for a reason you do not yet understand. You will be tested, observed, judged. If you pass, you will be free. If you fail, you will not suffer. You will simply be forgotten." Then she left again, leaving Liam more confused than before. The next day a test began. A machine brought puzzles to his room. Some were games of logic, some required emotion. Some made no sense at all. Liam tried his best. He was not a genius, but he was sharp and steady. He solved what he could and asked questions when allowed. Then he was moved to a combat hall where he was told to fight against machines that mimicked enemies from Earth. He fought hard. He fell. He stood again. He never begged. Each night he waited for the queen to return, but she did not. Instead, her voice came through the walls, sometimes asking strange questions. What do you feel when you kill? What does loss mean to your kind? Why do you sing? What is pain to you? Liam answered with honesty. He spoke of his mother who had died when the invaders came. He told of the cities turned to ash. He spoke of his fear and his anger and his will to live. He said, "I am not a weapon and not a tool. I am human, and I still remember who I am." On the seventh day, he tried to escape. He found a passage behind his room and crawled through dark tunnels guided by instinct. He reached a hangar but was caught before he could steal a ship. The guards surrounded him but did not harm him. They only brought him back to the Queen's chamber. She was waiting for him there. Her eyes did not glow this time. She looked tired. She asked, "Why did you run?" Liam said, "Because I am not yours." She nodded slowly and said, "You are right, but you are not free yet either. I did not buy you to own you. I bought you to understand something my people have forgotten. You are a key I must try to turn." Liam looked at her then and saw not just a queen but a being who carried a great weight. He did not understand her purpose, but he knew she was not lying. Something was different about her. She had power but also sorrow. She had everything yet seemed hollow inside. That night he did not sleep. He lay awake thinking not of escape but of what she had said. He remembered the look in her eyes, and for the first time he wondered if he had been brought here for something greater than survival. He no longer felt like a prisoner, but not yet like a guest. He was something in between. A question waiting for its answer. And he knew the next day would take him deeper into the mystery of Queen Alira and her strange purpose for him. Liam opened his eyes to the soft humming sound that filled the room. Like a quiet breath, the walls of his chamber seemed alive with moving patterns of light and shadow, like whispers passing through silk. Another day had begun inside the alien Queen's palace, but the feeling was unlike anything he had known on Earth. There were no steel bars or chains, no shouting guards or cruel punishments, only silence and strange machines that observed his every move like quiet watchers behind invisible eyes. It felt less like prison and more like being studied from behind a glass wall. The first test that morning came in the form of a chair that rose from the floor and a screen that floated in the air without wires or support. A voice not quite male, not quite female, asked him to describe shapes, emotions, memories, and sounds. Sometimes the screen showed images of fire, oceans, war, laughter, and sometimes it showed nothing at all. Liam answered with honesty, sometimes with hesitation, and sometimes with irritation, but he always answered. The voice never judged, only moved on to the next question, as if trying to peel away the layers of his thoughts. By midday, he was taken to a large hall with smooth silver floors and no ceiling, only a dome of moving light that gave the feeling of standing beneath a sky filled with dancing stars. In the center of the hall stood machines shaped like soldiers, each programmed to react with perfect timing and deadly skill. Liam was given a padded staff and told to defend himself. He fought with the instinct of someone who had known danger, had lived through chaos, and had nothing left to lose. His arms ached, his knees buckled, but he refused to fall easily. Each time he was knocked down, he rose again, not with anger, but with determination, not to be defeated by something that could not feel. Queen watched from a balcony high above, though Liam could not see her face. She stood still like a statue, made of dark water, unmoving but present, always present. He wondered what she saw in him, what she hoped to find or prove. She had said he was not a slave, but her actions were strange and confusing. She had power over him, yet gave him space. She held his fate, yet did not control his mind. It made him uneasy but curious. That evening he returned to his chamber, where food had been placed on the table. Fruit that glowed, meat that smelled of spices, unknown drinks that shimmered like liquid stars. He ate slowly, thinking of the day of the tests of the machines, and of the Queen's silent gaze. Then he found a small object on the table, a sphere no larger than an apple that lit up when he touched it. The voice returned and said, "This is not a weapon, it is a memory device from my people. Place your hand on it, and think of your strongest memory." Liam hesitated, then obeyed. He closed his eyes and thought of the last time he had seen Earth, not In ruins, but in beauty, before the invasion, before the skies turned red and the screams began. The device glowed brighter and began to show the memory in the air, not just as images but as feelings, warmth, wind, laughter, the smell of rain on stone, the touch of a mother's hand. It was as if the room itself was remembering through him. When the vision ended, the voice said softly, "Thank you. This was not for us. It was for you. To remember what you fight for." Later that night, as Liam lay on the soft surface that served as a bed, he felt a shift inside him. Not fear, not hope, something else, something unnamed. He had come here thinking only of escape or survival, but now he felt drawn to the mystery around him. The Queen was not what he had expected. Her people were not torturing him or experimenting on his body. They were probing something deeper, not his muscles, not his blood, but his soul. The next day was different. Instead of tests, Liam was brought to a garden that seemed to float above the city. It was not made of plants he recognized. The trees were shaped like spirals, the grass glowed with faint blue light, and the air smelled of memories long forgotten. Queen Alira waited there, sitting on a stone bench carved with stories and symbols he could not read. She gestured for him to sit, and he obeyed, not out of fear but out of respect. She looked at him for a long time before speaking. Her voice was calm but carried weight. She said, "My people are ancient and powerful, but we are dying not from war or disease, but from within. We have lost what makes life worth living. Joy has become function, love has become design, emotion has become weakness. We envy you humans, not for your strength, but for your chaos, for your beauty, for your ability to feel pain and still smile. That is what I seek to understand through you." Liam listened, unsure what to say. He asked, "Why him? Why not someone smarter, stronger, more obedient?" She smiled softly and said, "Because you do not break. You bend but do not fall. You fight without hate. You question without fear. You remind me of something we lost a long time ago. You are not here by chance. You are here because I chose you. And I believe you are the key." He looked at her and saw not a ruler, but a seeker, someone desperate to reclaim something sacred. For a moment they sat in silence, not as queen and subject, but as two beings caught between worlds, one searching for meaning and the other for freedom. That night, as Liam returned to his room, he no longer felt like a test subject. He felt like a thread being pulled through a greater pattern, one he could not yet see. The palace no longer seemed cold. The tests no longer felt cruel. The Queen no longer seemed alien. She seemed alone, and deep within Liam something shifted. He no longer wished to escape. He wanted to know more about her people, about why she had really brought him here. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I am not done yet, and neither is she." The days passed slowly, but something inside Liam began to grow heavier, not like a burden, but like a truth waiting to reveal itself. Each test, each word from the Queen, each passing hour within the palace was changing him in quiet ways. He could not yet explain. The place no longer felt like a trap, it felt like a puzzle, and at the center of it was Queen Alira, a figure of mystery, power, and sorrow wrapped in silence. He started noticing things, the way the walls of the palace pulsed softly, as if alive, the way the staff never looked him in the eye, as if ashamed or perhaps afraid, the way the Queen often stood alone in the garden after sunset, her hands behind her back, her gaze fixed on the stars, like someone searching for something long lost. One evening, Liam was summoned again, but not to the hall or the garden. This time he was led down a narrow spiral path, deep below the main chambers, guarded by none, a place untouched by light and noise. The air was cold, the walls were smooth and strange. Symbols glowed faintly like forgotten dreams, etched into stone. He was not told where he was going, and he did not ask. He only followed the silent guide. At the end of the path a door opened, not with a sound, but with a feeling. A rush of warm air touched his skin, and a light bathed him in a gentle glow. It was not artificial, it felt real, like sunlight, even Though they were deep underground, he stepped inside and saw Queen Alira waiting in the center of a room filled with floating screens and crystal pillars glowing with soft pulses of color. She looked at him not with authority, but with something closer to trust. She said, "This is where our truth lives, not in the thrones, not in the temples, but here in silence and in memory." Liam stepped closer and she raised her hand. A small device appeared, and a screen behind her flickered to life. It showed humans not like him, but others taken long before him, placed in rooms wired to machines, studied, watched, dissected, not for harm, but for answers. Liam felt cold anger rising in his chest, but the Queen spoke before he could release it. She said, "Yes. We did this, not me, but my people, long before you were born. We took humans not for destruction, but for discovery. We searched your minds, your hearts, your memories, trying to find what we had lost, what we had given up in our climb toward perfection. We became hollow, and we did not even see it." She showed him more memories, recordings of alien scientists, trying to mimic laughter, trying to recreate dreams through machines, trying to understand the feeling of love and fear and loss, but always failing. Because feeling is not a formula and emotion is not data. They saw humans cry and thought it was weakness, but they also saw humans rise after being broken, and they began to doubt their own beliefs. The Queen turned away from the screen and looked directly into Liam's eyes. She said, "When I first saw you, I saw the fire. I saw the anger, the defiance, and I knew you had not been broken. Like the others, you remembered who you were, even when chained. You carried pain but also pride, and that is what my people cannot copy. We can build ships that cross galaxies. We can create machines that think better than minds, but we cannot feel, not the way you do." Liam stood in silence, the storm inside him quieted by the truth that she was not his enemy. Not really. She was part of a system that had tried to replace feeling with logic, and had found nothing but emptiness. He looked at her and saw no cruelty, only longing, and it frightened him more than hate ever could, because longing makes the powerful weak. He asked her, "Why me? Why now? What makes me different from the others?" Her answer was soft and slow, "Because you still believe in something, even if you don't know what it is. Because you fight not just to live but to matter. Because even when you think no one is watching, you still choose to be more than a slave or a survivor. You choose to be human." She stepped closer, not as a queen, but as someone reaching across a great void, and she placed a small object in his hand. It was warm and pulsing with a gentle rhythm like a heartbeat. She said, "This holds what we recorded from you, your dreams, your memories, your pain, and your hope. If you wish to leave, I will not stop you, but if you choose to stay, you must understand this is no longer about you or me. It is about what comes next." Liam stared at the object and felt the weight of it, not just physical, but emotional. He had been taken against his will, sold like an object, watched like an animal, but now he stood at the edge of something new, something strange and dangerous, and maybe even beautiful. He looked at the Queen, and for the first time saw not an alien ruler, but a soul reaching for another. He asked her, "What do you want from me, really?" And she replied without hesitation, "I want to feel again. I want my people to feel again. I want the stars to mean something again. And I believe it starts with you, not because you are perfect, but because you are flawed and still trying. That is something we have forgotten." He did not speak for a long time. He walked around the room, touched the floating crystals, looked at the recordings of other humans, some smiling, some crying, some screaming, and he wondered what they had felt, and if he was the last one who still remembered who he was. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "I will not be your experiment, but I will be your mirror. If you want to see what it means to be human, then you must see it all, not just the beauty, but the pain, not just the strength, but the fear, not just the fire, but the ashes." The Queen nodded slowly, her face unreadable, her eyes full of things words could not carry. She said, "Then we begin, not as ruler and subject, but as two beings trying to rebuild something lost." As Liam left the chamber and returned to his room, he knew the journey had changed. He was no longer just a human trapped in an alien world. He was part of something larger, something that could shake empires and awaken Heart's long turned cold, and deep inside he felt something. Rise, not hope, not yet, but the beginning of it. The palace had changed, not in shape or sound, but in the way it breathed. The walls no longer felt cold, the air no longer carried silence like a curse. Something unseen was shifting. Deep beneath the golden towers and glowing halls, the queen had begun to change, and with her so had Liam. Once a prisoner, then a subject, and now something else, something not yet named. He walked the corridors not with fear, but with a strange sense of belonging. He was still watched, still studied, but no longer as a test, now as a symbol. News of Liam's presence had spread through the upper circles of the alien empire. Whispers grew louder behind crystal doors and under floating bridges. Many did not understand why the queen would give space to a human, why she would allow a lesser being to walk beside her without chains. Some said she had grown weak. Others said she had gone mad, but none dared speak it openly. Not yet. One evening, Liam was brought to the Great Hall, where leaders from distant cities had gathered. The walls shimmered with banners. The floor glowed with patterns that moved like rivers of light. The queen stood at the center, dressed not in robes of gold, but in simple cloth, dark and plain. A message to those who came that this meeting was not for show, but for truth. She spoke without raising her voice, yet the entire chamber fell silent. She told them of the sickness in their hearts, the emptiness that grew with each passing generation. She spoke of Liam, of his strength, not of body, but of spirit, of his memory, his emotion, his ability to suffer and still rise again. She said, "We are dying not because of war, but because we chose to forget how to feel, and this human has reminded me of what we lost." Some listened in silence, some nodded slowly, others showed nothing, but behind their still faces something cracked. Not all believed, but all felt. But power never surrenders without resistance, and in the days that followed the queen's speech, shadows moved across the corridors. Figures once loyal began to turn their eyes away when she passed. Once hidden voices began to gather in quiet rooms where plans were drawn not with weapons, but with poison. Whispers grew into promises, and soon betrayal was not just an idea, it became action. Liam felt the tension before he saw it. He noticed how the guards looked through him instead of at him, how servants moved quicker when near him, how even the machines that once greeted him now stayed still as if told to observe without offering comfort. One night while walking through the garden, he heard two officials speaking in low tones. They spoke of removing the queen, of restoring the old order, of ending the human experiment before it infected more minds. He returned to his chamber, heart pounding not from fear, but from rage. He wanted to tell her everything. But how could he? What proof did he have? What if his words only pushed her deeper into danger? The next morning he waited outside her council room, but she did not appear. He asked the guards. They said she was in isolation, reflecting before her next address. Liam knew something was wrong. He searched the palace without permission, through halls and towers, through dark staircases and hidden doors, until he found a small chamber near the medical wing, where two guards stood silently. They did not move. Liam could feel the air behind that door was heavy with danger. He had no weapon, no plan, only a voice, and he used it. He said, "I know what you are doing. I know she is inside, and if you let her die, you will not silence her ideas. You will only make them stronger." The guards did not respond, but a voice from within said, "Let him enter." The door slid open, and there she lay. Not dead, but weak, her skin pale, her breath slow, her eyes dim. She had been poisoned, not enough to kill, but enough to silence. She looked at Liam and tried to speak, but no words came. He knelt beside her and took her hand. It was cold, not like ice, but like stone losing its warmth. He whispered, "You trusted the wrong people, and now they want to erase everything you stood for. But I will not let them. I am not a ruler. I am not a soldier, but I am yours if you ask me to be." Her eyes closed, not in defeat, but in trust. The room fell quiet, as if the palace itself was holding its breath. Liam did not leave her side for 2 days. During that time, rumors spread that the queen was dying, that her human pet had cursed her, that a new leader would rise. and bring back the order of control and silence. But Liam had not come this far to watch her fade. He spoke to the healers, demanded answers, forced treatments. He learned her biology, her weakness, her strength, and he stood in her place before the council and said, if you fear her ideas, then fear me too, because I carry them now, and I will not be silent. They laughed at first, a human with no title, no name, no army. But then others stepped forward, not many, but enough. Some were young, some were old, some remembered what it meant to feel. They stood beside him, not for power, but for belief. And when the council tried to remove him, they found that the people no longer watched with fear, they listened with hope. On the third day, Alira opened her eyes, not fully healed, but stronger, her voice still weak, but her mind clear. She said, you should have left when you had the chance, and Liam answered, I did leave. I left the man who only wanted escape and became someone who wants to build. She smiled faintly and said, then let us finish what we began, not with war, not with fire, but with truth and change. Palace walls no longer shimmered with silence, now they pulsed with life. The halls echoed not with orders, but with voices, and Liam knew the final step was near, not just for him or the queen, but for a people on the edge of remembering what it meant to feel. The skies above Velmora turned golden as the twin suns rose together, casting their light across the palace towers, and the endless city below, where change moved like quiet fire, not loud, not sudden, but steady, like rivers that carve stone over time. The people who once whispered behind doors now spoke in open spaces. The faces that once stared with cold distance now blinked with questions. The old system that ruled with silence began to shake under the weight of something unfamiliar but not unwelcome inside. The heart of the palace, Queen Alira, stood once again, not in robes of tradition, but in a garment woven from simple cloth, a dark shade that carried the strength of silence and the warmth of shadow. Her recovery had been slow, her steps not yet firm, but her eyes held light, and her voice, when it returned, carried the weight of everything she had seen and everything she had chosen, not as a ruler who demanded obedience, but as a leader who invited trust. Beside her walked Liam, not as a slave, not as a possession, but as a companion. His clothes no longer marked him as lesser, his posture no longer bent, his eyes no longer searched for escape. Instead they watched the path ahead, where both danger and hope waited hand in hand. He had come to this world broken and chained, but now he moved with purpose, not because he had power, but because he had earned something far greater, the right to be heard together. They entered the central chamber, where the High Council sat. Once the voices inside had echoed with commands. Now there was quiet, not out of fear, but out of listening. The queen raised her hand and spoke, not of punishment or revenge, but of awakening. She told them, we were not made to be machines. We were not shaped by the stars to forget. Our hearts we sought control and lost compassion. We gained knowledge and lost meaning. Now we stand at the edge of forgetting who we truly are, and if we step forward with closed eyes, we will fall into a future where nothing lives, only functions. She looked to Liam and nodded. He stepped forward, and for a moment the chamber held its breath. Not because of who he was, but because of what he represented. He did not speak with the polish of a trained speaker. He spoke with the weight of truth. He said, I am not your enemy, and I never was. I came here in chains. I was stripped of my name and treated like a tool, but in that darkness, I found something your people had lost. Not strength, not speed, not control. I found feeling, I found memory. I found the courage to keep going, not because I had to, but because I chose to. He turned slowly, letting his words land like seeds, not stones. He said, you cannot force emotion into your veins. It must grow from the ground of your soul. You cannot program love or joy or sorrow. They must be earned through connection, through pain, through struggle. You cannot build meaning with machines. You must live it with others, and that begins by remembering who we are, not what we were designed to be, but what we choose to become. The council did not clap. They did not cheer. They only watched, and in their silence, there was no rejection, only reflection. For the first time in generations, they were not rulers, they were students, and Liam had become their mirror. Days passed and the changes began small, At first the treatment of humans shifted. They were no longer called subjects, they were called citizens. Doors that were once locked opened, learning centers invited humans to speak and share their stories. Young ones from the alien families sat with them, listened to Earth songs, touched Earth soil grown in domes, and asked questions not from curiosity alone but from hunger, a hunger for something real. Queen Alira met with her people not as a figure of untouchable power, but as one of them. She listened more than she spoke. She walked without guards. She sat in gardens and shared meals with workers and thinkers and wanderers. She told them, I am not your command, I am your echo. What you give me, I will return. What you lose, I will help you find again. Liam remained close, not because he had no place to go, but because he had found a reason to stay. He no longer dreamed of running back to Earth, not because he forgot it, but because he had brought it with him. Inside him lived its fire, its sorrow, its endless hope. He walked among the alien people and taught them not from books, but from living. He laughed, he argued, he cried, and in doing so he helped others do the same. One evening, as the suns dipped low, casting long shadows across the garden where they first spoke, Alira and Liam sat in silence. Between them lay no crown, no contract, no chain, only trust. She turned to him and asked, if I had not bought you that day at the market, where do you think you would be? He smiled softly and said, maybe dead, maybe lost, but maybe still human, because that's the one thing they could never take from. Mesh looked at him and said, then maybe I was the one who was bought, not you. Maybe it was I who was saved. He shook his head and said, no, we saved each other, not with power or force, but with truth. You taught me that strength is not in resistance alone, but in connection, and I taught you that emotion is not weakness, it is light in the dark. Stars appeared one by one above them, as if listening to their words, and far across the city voices rose, not in protest but in song, not in war but in story. Humans and aliens shared tales, not of battles but of beginnings, and as the night stretched on, the palace did not sleep, it breathed, it lived. Then so the story did not end with victory or defeat, but with a beginning, a new empire shaped not by conquest, but by courage, not by blood, but by belief. Liam had not just survived, he had become part of something greater, not a legend, not a myth, just a man who remembered how to feel, and a queen who dared to feel again. In that world of stars and silence, where machines once ruled, hearts now beat once more. The end.